If you're trying to recruit someone, that's a story. If you're trying to fundraise, that's a story. If you're trying to do a blog or an interview, that's a story. And is there a better medium than what exists today? That's what we're really excited about.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our Applied Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by TerraLeap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today, I'm excited to be joined by my guest, Peter Clark, who's based in Seattle, Washington. He's the CEO and co-founder at Journey. Welcome, Peter. Good to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Now, Journey, your product, is what you call a storytelling platform for the internet. Now, it's kind of fun. It's kind of interesting. It leaves it fairly vague, which may be on purpose. Help me understand, what's the problem that you initially saw and set out to solve?
Yeah, I think what we found was trying to buy software on the internet is inevitably salespeople saying, hey, let's jump on the phone. And, as a buyer, you don't always want to do that. I don't always want to go through a relatively draconian sales process of talking to an SDR, not getting the pricing, not seeing a product demo, getting, switched to a different person. And, you go through this whole rigmarole. And we were like, isn't there a better way of fixing that? And that's kind of what we, having ran growth, seeing a lot of metrics about this stuff, we were really excited about trying to fix that and make that a better experience for both buyers and sellers.
So it's definitely on the sales cycle, the sales process that you saw this opportunity of, all right, everyone always follows a journey, but how can we make that more interesting, be able to tell the story better? Am I getting that right? It's like, that's what you saw?
Yeah, I think what we saw was storytelling is this really interesting thing that isn't really spoken about as like a concept. But sales is obviously storytelling, and there's stories are told all over the place. If you're trying to recruit someone, that's a story. If you're trying to fundraise, that's a story. If you're trying to do a blog or an interview, that's a story. And is there a better medium than what exists today? That's what we're really excited about.
All right, so take me back then. When did you first start thinking about, what year was this that you saw this challenge before you started the company?
Yeah, so it was 2010, so 11 years ago.
11 years. Okay.
Yeah, I moved to America to go through the investor Y Combinator, and I went through with a mobile app, which was an asynchronous video messaging product. And this was before Snapchat. This was just as the iPhone was coming out, and it was the concept that we were pitching was video voicemail. And what we found was that the product didn't really work for various reasons. It just was hard to convince people to take videos at the time and those things. But what we did see was that emails were working really well. We could drive people back into the product. If you sign up for the product, you get an email 3 days later. So we ended up pivoting the company and starting a company called UserFox, which was a B2B email marketing product. And when I was running that company, I saw that, hey, sending more emails has a profound impact on your business. If you look at a start, if you look at most startups, they send one email to a new user. It turns out if you send 4, it's much better. And that is actually not that, groundbreaking of an insight, because what happens is emails just have a really bad conversion rate, like 0.5% conversion rate. So if you send 4 emails, you obviously improve the chance of that conversion rate. Mm-hmm. And then as we built this product, we saw like you hit like a ceiling of how many emails can you send, because you can't send hundreds of emails. So then you need to start sending better emails. And that's really hard. And, it's hard to write an email. It's hard to create a landing page and all these things. So in the back of my mind, I was like, there's a really big business, not in sending emails, but in making the content of the email much, 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 much better.
Oh.
And then UserFox got acquired by AdRoll, where I worked with, I think one of your previous guests, Adam Burke, and he was the CMO, and I worked with him for 4 years. And working at a B2B company, I saw the exact same thing. A salesperson has to try and sell their product, and writing this amazing single email works not as good as sending 4 very short, simple emails. So it's the same problem, which is you want to send more emails. There's a ceiling to how many emails you can send. And also salespeople have another interesting challenge of bandwidth constraint. They can't spend 3 hours on one email. So how do you increase that? So kind of back in my mind, hey, this is same problem. I then left AdRoll and I went and worked at the e-cigarette company Juul, Juul, where I ran, if you're familiar with the vaping company. And I ran super random, very bit of a random step, but I really wanted to sit on the other side of the table of product and marketing. And, I'd been selling growth and marketing software for 8 years at that point. And I really wanted to be the buyer to understand what does it feel like to be buying these tools, spending six figures on these tools. And I worked at Juul, and we saw the same problem, but on the other side, which was salespeople send me barrages of emails. And, I was getting dozens of emails from sales reps. They were all garbage, not at all compelling. Getting an email Sunday morning, which says, hey, Peter, do you want to jump on the phone for 15 minutes to talk about my vague product? It's like, no. That was one. And then Juul had the same problem as AdRoll and as, every startup I worked with, which was telling their story, very complex, very charged, sensitive story. We had an email marketing product. We used Iterable. We had tens of millions of users in this database. Really hard to send emails, really hard to write an email that converts, really hard to convince someone to make a very sensitive decision, like switching from combustible cigarettes to vaping. Very hard to create a landing page that tells that story. So at Juul, we actually saw the same problem again, which was it isn't just selling software that's hard. Buying software is hard, both sides of this equation. If I want to buy a new B2B product, which Juul, I had a $1 million budget for software, I was just getting inundated with these generic emails. But then also on the consumer side, the same problem, which was, hey, it's actually really, really hard to communicate with consumers at scale. The very best in breed products, the Klavios of the world, the Optimizely of the world. What do they let you do? They let you insert Alexander into the subject line. They don't let you move the story forward in a meaningful way. It's like the very most sophisticated email marketers will basically, insert your name and maybe A/B test the button color. But it isn't, you're not drastically changing that story. So again, back in my mind, that was now, three very clear points of there's a problem here of how we communicate on the internet. So that was very long-winded, but hopefully that made sense.
I want to take a step back for a moment. So 2010, you first initially start to realize the need for better storytelling, this stretch of opportunity. And you start with kind of in the video space, not working out, but turns into, I'm trying to remember the company Fox.
UserFox and email marketing.
Email marketing, which then gets acquired. What was the year frame? I'm trying to remember just like the timeline here.
Yeah, the company UserFox was started in 2010, and it was acquired by AdRoll in 2013.
Okay, and then you
worked
for 4 years. So then you joined Juul in 2018. 2018. and then from there, when did Journey.io come into existence?
So I worked at Juul for 2 years. So I left in early 2020, and at that point was really like, hey, there's something interesting here of these data points that I've accumulated. And then it took us about 6 months to figure out what is this product. And, that was like the back half of 2020. And then I think by January of this year, we were like, this is approximately what we're going to build.
When you began, your co-founders and stuff, how did you guys meet? How did you start talking about this? Are you naturally just ready to dive in and leave a nice, comfy corporate job and start again?
Well, my two co-founders, Anil and Brandon, I worked with them at AdRoll, and Anil I worked with at Juul as well. So he's been my engineering counterpart at AdRoll and at Juul. So the three of them were a natural fit to start this company because they have all of the same anecdotes as me.
And this being your second one that you've now started and began, were there any before Fox Search, or was that the first one?
We did a few. I did a few when I was back in England. I graduated school in 2007, and I spent the subsequent 3 years before I moved to America doing, I wouldn't necessarily call them startups, but projects or things, and just iPhone apps when the iPhone store first came out, and was really, we were 22. We didn't know 22 in 2008 was very before startups were really a thing. So we were just we were very inspired by like desktop Mac applications that we thought were really good and just building interesting things, mostly unsuccessfully.
I feel like you start to paint this picture of 2010. You're seeing this challenge that it's just a constant evolution of this idea. You develop it more, it goes into this thing, and then you're still always on this same track. Am I understanding that correctly? Is this like one long track for you, or do you see them all different ideas?
I'd say it's all related. Yeah, it was only when we started Journey and then we looked back, we started connecting a number of dots.
When you jump in with your co-founders, they're like, oh yes, immediately they get it, light bulb, or was there a lot of discussion in the beginning with Journey?
We were, I think, unusually academic in what we were doing. We basically wrote up kind of a thesis, which was around, okay, if you build this new medium for storytelling, it would have a few really compelling attributes. So firstly, it would be incredibly viral. So the theory would go, if you built a new medium for storytelling and then someone received that story and it was delivering on its promise of it working, they would be compelled to also use that product because, it'd be like a glass of ice cold water where you're like, oh, this is very different from what I previously experienced. And most importantly, it genuinely works. And what we kind of felt like was it's good and bad. The bad is that it's a huge bar, very high bar. We're basically reinventing a video as a concept in some ways. But the good is that if you can crack it, the business has some very large benefits. The virality becomes really, really, really strong. So we were kind of like, hey, let's just like focus on this problem area. We don't know what the product will look like, but the thesis of this virality of you get it and it's like, oh, wow, this is really interesting is really exciting to us.
You bootstrap this from the beginning, get funding. Like, what was your approach to getting this kickstarted?
We made the problem we had was from the very beginning was nobody had any idea what we were talking about. We didn't have a product, and we would say things like, we are building a storytelling tool, and they'd be like, what does that mean? And you'd be like, it's a bit like video plus text combined, but like much better than a presentation. And people would be like, but what is it? Or who would use it? And then you start saying, well, everybody can tell stories. So like sales and marketing or founders, you end up with this like very amorphous product. So we built a very, very early prototype, which was, we built it in, Anil was a very talented engineer. So we built a prototype and we used that prototype to raise money. So the prototype was our fundraising deck. And it was very obviously and intentionally crappy, but it was meant to just like paint the picture of, it was really around choose your own adventure presentations. Like, what if a presentation wasn't just linear, but it had like a decision tree where you could say, well, who's the team or how much are you raising? And you could like kind of go through it that way.
I really love that terminology, choose your own adventure.
Yes.
Like everyone can think of whether the old books and okay, go to page 72
exactly.
or the text-based choose. But so you create a mock-up and you use that to get the funding. Do people, when you had even just a basic mock-up, were your funding partners, they get it? Did the investors see it?
We got really lucky where we found a few investors very early on where they were like, they really got excited about the idea that, hey, if you can build this tool, the use cases can explode. There's, air conditioner installing man, he should use a Journey to send his $12,000 proposal for AC units. Tesla selling you a new car. There's all these touch points. So they got really excited about this massive addressable market of storytelling. And so we raised $2.5 million in about 2 weeks before we had a product.
Wow. Okay. So and then you're off to the races, building it. Was it simple creating it and just making it better? Like what's been the? I know it's not been that long. I mean, what, a year now, but what's the process been like this past year?
I think we've realized that it's much bigger opportunity than we expected. The virality is a lot more exciting than we expected, honestly. It's even in the first version of the product, we see a ton of virality. And so we've kind of realized that in some ways, I think that we thought that we would be much further along now than where we are. But what we found is just like building this product is really complex. So, we're just scratching the surface in some ways.
When you say complex, like help me understand, what is the complexity?
It's the modular nature of the product. So a journey is composed of a number of different assets. So you can have video, you can have slides, you can have your calendar, DocSign, you can kind of drag and drop a whole bunch of content and then sequence them. And what we found is that it's really hard to create a user interface that allows you to embed all of this content in a very intuitive way. And then also it's hard to do that. And then it's also very complex because the recipient has no awareness of a journey. So, if you go and you create a journey and you drop in 3 or 4 different things, that's one problem of how do you do that building experience. But then the other side is also true, which is how do you make that experience, much better for the recipient as well.
Mm-hmm. The two-sided piece. And I appreciate earlier you were talking about where you saw the problem being this challenge of you need to send better emails and have better stories all in the same amount of time, and the experience both for the person who's trying to tell the story as well as the person who wants to consume the story, making it a positive experience. Has there been any aha moments, like something when you started to build it and you saw a reaction on one piece that you weren't expecting, or just any realizations this past year that got you excited?
Yeah, I'd say that we didn't expect to see the traction that we've seen in fundraising, which is funny because our prototype worked really well for fundraising, but we see a lot of startups using Journey for fundraising, and it kind of makes sense because that's like the biggest deal of your life in some ways. So you really want to make that presentation really good. But we have, at any given time, we have 50 or 75 startups sending journeys out as a way of like an interactive medium for fundraising. So people are raising, $5 million on an interactive journey, which is super exciting. And I wouldn't say that was a use case that we were initially focused on.
Which by itself gets your name in every case.
Yes.
Though. Whoever sends it gets the virality is built into it. They help market the product. For the data itself of people using it, anything you can share just like right now of what people are, or how many people are using it, or the number of journeys being created, or anything that you know off the top of your head that you're able to share?
Yeah, I mean, we just crossed 1,200 journeys created by our users.
Nice.
So it's a large milestone for us. I mean, obviously we crossed 1,000. That was the big milestone, and we crossed that a few weeks ago, and now we're up to about 1,200. So that's one that we think is really exciting. And then we have about I'd say we have around 250 active users in the platform. So so we're super early. The version that we have on the website is like the V0, and we're introducing our V1, I would say, in the next month or so.
Oh, okay. As a disclaimer for the viewers, I have been using this product actually before I even got to interview Peter. It was Adam who told me about you guys. I ended up looking it up, and I'm like, all right, definitely got to interview you. But I ended up saying, you know what, I want to start using this already. And I have been trying to tone down my excitement for it. But the only thing is you don't really see the value once you get in it. As you just stated earlier, telling someone else, oh, there's just a better way to put all your stuff together and share it with someone. I mean, in the past, I'd put it like just links in a Google Doc or links in an email, and no one would pay attention to it. No one would click on it. And I've already, all the people that I send this to, like, what is this? I want to go try it out. And I'm like, yeah, there's a waitlist. But that's an interesting approach. Also, you guys chose the waitlist approach. Why did you do that?
Just because, so if you're building a product that has virality and like product-led growth is kind of the fancy term for it. I think it's actually much harder than people realize to build those products. You have to have, as few edges as possible. It has to be a really good experience. And we're not there yet. So we've been kind of onboarding people and, we've been trying to figure out, firstly, what does the builder experience look like? And then secondly, what does the onboarding experience look like? Do you do like a superhuman style, where you have to have a meeting with someone, which I always think is like incredibly draconian. It goes against the philosophy of the company. But at the same time, we're 6 months in, so we haven't built everything. We haven't manifested the entire product yet. So we're trying to thread this needle. But if people, if UpTech viewers sign up for the waitlist and they put your name in the comments, they will obviously we'll be sending them an invite immediately up.
So it shouldn't be a barrier for people to be able to sign up. But interesting, you make a great point, because I've had several people on the series who are more product led, and it is not easy. The upside, if you can get it to where people just get it and they start signing on. Did you do product led with UserFox as well, or was that, what was your approach on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to define what product led growth is. So, UserFox and ad roll was a bottoms up product. Anybody could use that product. So, is that product led growth? Yes, and I suppose it is. But I define product led growth as something like Calendly or like DocuSign, or DocSend, where the product itself is a vehicle for driving signups. So actually, you have a viral loop of you as a user can get me more users for my product. And that's the key distinction here, which is like that additional step of virality, which most B2B companies do not have.
And you're saying Waitlist, being able to talk to each person and helping them on is a better at the beginning. Eventually, you're saying once you cart off the edges, that's something you would take away.
Absolutely. I think it'll be gone in a few months. It's really just a matter of, we wanted to be cognizant of the first journey that you see should be reasonably good, and we didn't want to have, just if you build software in a month and then you expect thousands of people to use it, it's obviously not going to be the best experience. And then, it's like they will end up being lethargic about using the product, or they won't use the product correctly because he hasn't got the guidance. So you can kind of go into a bit of a spiral in a bad way. If
going back to yourself, like when you started in UserFox, like 11 years ago, and you were to tell yourself something that you know now, is there any like major learnings that come to you that you want to go back and tell yourself?
I would say the single thing that I think about and wish I would do more of is move slower. Like be more methodical and move slower, and like be more iterative, and don't let products out of the bag until you really feel like they've been proven with a small amount of users.
Okay, let's break that one down, because that's actually opposite of a lot of other people have said. They've said move faster, get things rolling, don't be afraid. Why move slower and more methodical?
Well, I think the bar for software today is very high. Like I think that the idea that there's a meme of like an MVP, which is a bicycle with one wheel and it falls over, versus like a skateboard that becomes a bicycle, and like that is just not useful advice, because it's so hard to create a product where you have one feature and that one feature is like a killer feature, because users are inundated with software nowadays. They don't want to use 1,000 different pieces of software. The sum of a product is often like greater than the single features in some ways. You have to so I think that, and we've seen this with Journey, which is if we're the storytelling tool, if you have an editor, which is you've thrown together and is really complex, people don't want to use that. If you have an editor, which is very intuitive, people will use it. So I think what founders and people need to ask themselves is like, what are you trying to learn by launching in a month? Because most of the time, what people learn is it's not good enough. It's like, it isn't, people like to think that finding product market fit is this very binary thing where it's like you launch and it either blows up or it implodes. But the reality of software is 95% of things, you're in this fudgy gray area where it's like, well, I have some users that like my product and I have many users that haven't used it yet. Or do they not like it, or have they not used it yet? And I think the more iteration and care you put into your product, the more you can narrow that gray area. And I think that that's a really important thing for founders to spend not 1 month, but 3 months to make it so it's more of a shot at being a binary thing.
My next question was going to be, what is your metrics of knowing when is it ready to move to the next stage? Or you're saying your methodological approach. Is it like a 3 month? Is it just basically 3x longer? Take 3x longer to think about something?
I think it's giving it to users and like getting their feedback, watching them, recording the sessions, and making sure that they they go into the funnel and come out the other end? Like that's really what matters. Like, do they get confused? Do they bail? Do they not get excited about it? And like, that's really what matters. And, like if you spend 3 months versus 1 month, you will get more users going through that funnel. It's very hard to build really good software really quickly. That's really thoughtful. And you need to like spend more time. I'm not saying that no users should use it. I'm not saying that you should just go off to the mountains and have nobody use this product. But I think it's really important to be aware that if you take a product like Linear, if you're familiar with Linear.app, it's a Jira alternative. And why is it better than Jira? It's better because it's better software. There's no single feature that I can tell you that's really good. There's no individual widget or feature or doodad that it does where you're like, wow, this is so much better. But when you use the product, it's a very cohesive experience. It's very fast. It works really well. And in 2021, people like using software that's genuinely good and has a level of craftsmanship. And you can't get that. You can't get that in a month.
Switching gears a little bit, of coming to the storytelling, let's pontificate here. Let's look forward. More than where you are right now. 5, maybe even 10 years from now. But let's just look at 5. What will the future storytelling look like on the internet?
Yeah. I think that if you look at the mediums right now, if you look at this interview, if I wanted to share this interview and I wanted to only listen to the part about the MVP discussion, video is quite a challenging format to do that kind of thing. So, and I personally am a fast reader, so I like to read transcripts. But then transcripts, you lose a lot of quality. They're not as edited necessarily as the video. So what we're really excited about is creating a content medium which can adapt to how the recipient wants to consume the content. So imagine a video where there's very clear chapters, and then when I'm in a chapter, I can press a button and I can have that just reveal the transcript. And there can be very clear call to actions. So when I referenced Linear earlier, there would obviously be a link to view that product. And like, that's kind of what we're really excited about. It's more like a video game intro sequence where, it's like telling you to move in directions, it has guidance, has interactivity, and it's very engaging.
What are your thoughts on, especially as of this recording, there's a couple events coming up. Today there's one with Facebook, next week was with Apple, in the AR space, and there's things in VR. Do you have any perspectives on more immersive storytelling as well? Do you think you'll ever play in that space, or what are your thoughts on that when it comes to storytelling?
I can see it for, movies will be replaced by video games, and it makes sense that video games will have that level of reality, augmentation and stuff. But I think for collaboration it's really exciting, but I think for external stuff, it'll be really hard to get for that stuff to be really resonate with people.
So for like in the B2B space, being able to use an interactive, more immersive, let me not say interactive, let me say immersive storytelling experience, not for the foreseeable future, you're saying?
I think my concern is that you need to lower the bar, not raise the bar. Software in 2021, especially B2B software, the velocity of sales is ever increasing. People are trying more products. The bar is getting lower and lower and lower. So that's kind of where you want to aim. Whereas I feel like the VR stuff is going to be a higher bar to commitment. I'm not.
Got it. Yeah, it's what most people knowing that everyone could use. That's what they want to focus on versus only a few people in a select group.
Yeah. I think for things like customer success, it's really exciting. You could do, onboarding, and it could become like, you enter a virtual Apple theater, and it could become like a really hands-on experience like that. Like that stuff is cool.
Okay. And if they're beyond just what we've talked about, is there anything that you're very excited about when it comes to technology and predictions of what's coming up?
I'm really excited to see how artificial intelligence improves user experience. I think that this is an area where it doesn't really happen today, but I always use like my iPhone keyboard as an example. It's kind of shaky in terms of quality, but there's clearly a lot going on in the background to figure out what words do I use. And I would love to see more around that. Like, why do I have to drag apps to my home screen? Why doesn't it just know that I use the same apps at the same time, and those kinds of things? So, I think people are spending a lot of time, with AI and, content generation and those kinds of things. But I'm really excited about how can a computer adapt to how I want to work.
I'm letting that just sit there for a moment. How can a computer know how I want to work and for it to adapt? Is that a difficult problem to solve, though?
I think that, yes, but I think it's absurd that in 2021, every website we visit, every browser that we use is the same. Like, why is your and mine software experience the same? Like, maybe we have very different ways of working. Maybe we have different kind of approaches or styles. And I think computers need to get much smarter.
A future is personalized through AI.
Yeah, I think that it's shocking to me that, all these tools we use today, and I'm not picking on anyone in particular, but all software today doesn't adapt to how a user wants to work.
Could you see a future also with Journey integrating elements of that the experience is customized using some sort of artificial intelligence?
I think the analogy I always go back to is like, do you want to listen to a podcast or read an article? And individual recipients usually have a tendency towards one or the other. And how can you make it so the presentation or the journey that you're on will automatically adapt to how the recipient wants to consume content? Maybe I just want to listen. Like, some people like audiobooks, some people like reading, some people like watching. And how can you make it so that that experience is the best for the recipient without being crushing for the creator?
A powerful future that in many ways is not that far away.
Yeah,
the journey that you've taken us on, Peter, from this idea already 10, 11 years ago that you had, that I think is a worthwhile problem to solve, of just better communicating and sharing information in a unique story. For those that want to learn more, I'm sure a lot of you do, you can go over to journey.io. And be able to join that waitlist, or maybe by the time you watch this, that waitlist maybe will be gone, and be able to explore more. Thank you so much, Peter, for your time and joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
And we'll see you all on the next episode of UpTech Report. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.